And now joining us to break down everything that's been going on in the White House and that press briefing we just heard there from Karoline Leavitt is Mike Leon, NTD News contributor and host of the podcast, Can We Please Talk? Mike, always great to see you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Fiona. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's start with the big one, tariffs, right? We just, as I just said there, right? Clearly, the White House has a stance here on China's retaliation, and they're saying, hey, at the end of the day, this is going to be worse for China than for the U.S., and at the end of the day, China is going to have to come to the table at some point. What are you hearing about any sort of concerns regarding tariffs right now?
Yeah, I think the concern, Fiona, is shared amongst, small business owners, because what's going to happen now is that, you plan your fiscal year out, right? You make projections for the whole year. For any small business owner, let's say somebody like in retail, for example, that already relies on importing or exporting, shipping goods, et cetera, to keep their business afloat, they have to figure out expenditures, what is some overflow cash, like should they be, kind of hanging on to their purse strings as opposed to spending on other parts of the business that could amplify the business, marketing costs, promotional efforts, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's kind of the wait and see approach that I see from a lot of people. And again, it varies based on the industry, because depending upon what you either import from China or get exported from China back, that's cheaper than making it here in the United States or getting it done here in the United States or somewhere else. I think that's the thing that companies are going through right now. Just to give it an example for somebody like me in the private sector who does stuff in product and technology, it's tough to make things in the United States, especially when your resources are engineering hours, right? And you're getting statement of works from these firms, and it's cheaper to offshore it, Fiona, like that's just the case, right? And a lot of small business owners are going through that right now. Maybe they're having to upend their fiscal and take a look at what they want to do for the rest of the year because of the tariff impact. But I think because of China, it's going to depend on the sector. It's going to depend on the industry, right? But I think a lot of people right now are kind of in that same boat. Is this going to continue to remain throughout the year from 145%? And if so, what's another country that we can leverage? Maybe it's internal here in the US, or maybe it's somebody else that manufactures the same thing, makes the same thing, and we can get a comparable price. And I think that's kind of where a lot of small businesses that I've talked to, especially here in the Florida area, are kind of impacted, and what they're reacting to, as this is an ongoing situation daily.
Now, of course, these are all very legitimate concerns from these business owners. You mentioned there the difficulty, right, one of prices when it comes to sourcing, whether it be materials or labor, as well as the sort of expertise and just materials in general, the availability of it. Do you think to a certain degree President Trump's promise of deregulation could help to solve some of those issues or help to lessen some of those concerns?
I mean, it could. Look, I want to go to the overarching point. The reason he's done all of this, Fiona, and I've talked to so many different people about this, because I am not an economist, as you can tell, Fiona. I'm not the economist. The economist experts have all told me two things. One, this has been Trump's MO for forever. He wrote a book about it, right? He likes to cut a deal. He's using tariffs as a negotiating ploy. He doesn't see it as actually leveraging the 5, 10, 15, 20%, whatever it is that the administration announces. He doesn't see that as the final number. He sees it as a bargaining chip to get countries to come over here and renegotiate this. The problem is, as economists will tell you, the U.S. already set this up decades ago. This was all set up post-World War II. So you're going against things that other administrations have done that didn't need to be upended. Now, in terms of the deregulation, yes, maybe some of that will actually help with this. But I think what's been really pivotal, or at least something that I've noticed the most, has really been how much he's really aimed it at China. He feels China is the epicenter of where a lot of companies, and China and Beijing has mentioned this in press releases, right? They're going to work with our allies, and they're going to reach out to them and say, hey, why don't we cut a deal? So there is, it was asked in the press briefing earlier today, like, what is stopping a country that's an ally of ours from already working with China, because we're treating friends and foes alike in this tariff trade war tit for tat situation, like you labeled it before, Fiona. So this is part of it, right? Like this mass uncertainty and confusion that trickles to the markets. That's why we see the markets go down. Then they have a little bit of a boom back, but they're still not at the same percentage rates. And I think maybe the deregulation does help with all of it, but the uncertainty and the volatility doesn't help with any of it, especially when it's self-inflicted and self-created, when there didn't need to be this. But again, in Trump's eyes and the administration eyes, and he's within his right to think this way, he thinks that we have been taken advantage of for far too long, and he wants to reset the global trade market.
Mike, to that point of the concerns of pushing U.S. allies to China, we heard just then Press Secretary Leavitt say, hey, if you're worried about that, just look at the 15 or so offers that are already on the table in like the first few days of these 90 days. We also saw the Australian government just a day or two ago saying that they will not be working with the Chinese government, as the Chinese government has called on them to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the point, right? Look, Karoline Leavitt said this a few times in there, and she's right about this. The U.S. is too big of a market. It's too big of a footprint. It's too big of a consumer base that would buy foreign goods, right? So like to alienate an entire market as somebody who has, done total addressable markets, right? When you're doing a product launch and you want to reach out to what's the total addressable market here in North America, what's it globally, right? You can't leave out the United States from that and the 334 million or so people that live here in the US. Anybody that does that would be asinine to do that. However, what you can do is kind of to your point, not circumvent, but you can work with people that make things similar for a cheaper cost and then figure out where you can saturate in other places that maybe you haven't saturated your product with respect to that. So I would love to hear more from the administration of who are these actual countries that are coming to the negotiating table and what is it that is being negotiated? What is the percentage and where's the finality in all of it? Because the finality in all of it, Fiona, is what the market is looking to and what the market reacts off of. The volatility and the uncertainty doesn't help, but they want to know the finality of it. What's the final number? So that way we can start playing nice with these folks and that it'll trickle backwards, like we just mentioned, to the small business owners. Now they'll know, okay, now I can import from X country because the tariff margin is nil or it's X percentage. And I know that what that's going to impact to my operating budget, my costs for the rest of the year, and that'll lead to my projections and so on and so forth.
I'm sure there'll be more details coming out sometime within the next 90 days. Mike, last question on tariffs before we move on here. We're hearing from Democratic senators like Adam Schiff, Ruben Gallego. They're calling for an investigation into alleged insider trading after President Trump paused these reciprocal tariffs. The White House is responding, accusing these senators of playing, quote, partisan games. Mike, how likely are we to see a real investigation come out of this, or do you think this is just noise right now?
I'm so glad you said the phrase real investigation. And I think therein lies the problem, right? Because on the surface, it doesn't look good when a president of the United States is taken to a social media platform and telling people to invest in something, and then it rises. And then you see him in a press conference later on, and he points out to Charles Schwab, which is a video that has been making the rounds on social media, saying, hey, this guy just made millions of dollars, because of my message on social media. The impropriety of that is not great. However, is that legally wrong? I don't know. We need an investigation. So I think the one thing that I would point out, Fiona, is in those notes from those senators has been, and Elizabeth Warren said this, the most vociferous of all that I can listen to or find, is that it should be an independent investigation. I think right now, anybody who's listening to this, anybody who's going to be in the comments when this video goes online, Fiona, they're going to be like, oh, what's independent? They're going to roll their eyes. We need independent investigations. I think the White House would welcome, if it rose to that level, some type of independent investigation. But again, I think there is a little bit of political gesturing on this front, but I also think that they have a reason for bringing this up, because if somebody else on the opposite side of the aisle had done something similar, especially from the executive branch, and had posted it to social media, and then the market fluctuation happened, and you point to a case example sitting right next to you of somebody who made money from that, who's a friend of yours, it would scream of impropriety, right? So I think the key word is back to what you said, real investigation. Do we ever get one? Do we get one that's actually independent from all of this? I don't think we will, Fiona.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call Low Cost Airlines. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call now.